podcast. We're hanging out at Big Rock Brewery, chatting with Ignacio Rodriguez. How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Well, good. Cheers. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming by. It's great to meet you and join the podcast.
Well, so you're the operations manager, head brewer here.
Correct. Well, or manager of Brewing Operations.
Yeah.
But yes.
A lot of pressure on you.
A little bit. It can get sometimes, but it's also a lot of fun. So it's a combination.
So when you first started at Big Rock, for anybody, certainly in Alberta, and I think a lot of people maybe across Canada as well, Big Rock was one of the first craft breweries. A lot of in Alberta there's a big trickle down effect. When you look at where people in the industry came from, a lot of them, their roots are Big Rock. Obviously starting with Ed McNally. One of my mentors, Alistair Smart, he was one of the first salespeople, I'd say the first salesperson here. And when I think about the beer industry in Alberta, and you just see how much influence those people had with all the people that came after them, in the way that all of their philosophies and their mentalities and the way that they built that culture has just really permeated our beer community. Did you have a sense of what Big Rock was all about before you started?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've known Big Rock just because when I moved to Canada, that was back in 2015.
Yeah.
I moved to Calgary first, and the first beer I had, it was Purple Gas from Big Rock. I went to, I can't remember, I think it was a Cobb liquor store.
Yeah.
And I went to the cooler and then got a pack, and it had Purple Gas, it had Pilsner, had a couple other beers. I think it was Strat in there as well. And it was amazing. I was like, I really like the designs, and I remember trying it, and I was like, wow, this is. Then I kind of started looking into the breweries, and then reading a little bit on the webpage and the history of the company, and just finding out, next year we're going to be 40 years in business.
Crazy.
Which is, it is crazy to think about. There's not many craft breweries in the country right now that can say they have been around for 40 years, not interrupted, sorry, and been pioneers in a space that you could think maybe 20 years ago it was just a really, really kind of outlier space where consumers will see the craft brewing a little bit, and the way just to think the way that Ed and the people that started the company went over the beers they want to make and how to connect with the consumer and the community as well, because Big Rock kind of, as you said, permeated across into the communities and got tied in there. So they made all these beers, and year over year, slowly gaining a little bit of that share that was just made open just for the regular macro breweries, and just taking a little bit of it and it started getting the consumers interested in new liquids. And I think that paved the way for a lot of the craft breweries right now, right, in terms of the innovations and the different beer styles. And it's something really that I find super excited and interesting to see how a guy back then in the 80s thinking, okay, let's get this guy that's used to drink Molson and try a brown ale, and
exactly.
would people know what was a brown ale other than people from the UK and things like that back then. So yeah, to me that was something really cool. And when I was trying to looking into breweries to work with, as soon as I saw an opportunity with Big Rock, I'll say to me it was it is to me Big Rock. It is the founder brewery in the Alberta space.
So you've been here 2 years now?
2 years and a half now, going into my third now.
So did you ever get a chance to work with Paul
Gautreaux?
Yeah.
No, not directly. I know Paul. He comes in and out often, and we've chatted. I know him.
Yeah.
But I never worked directly with him.
So how much did he? Because when I think about all of the beers, and to your point, in the 80s, making brown, beers that, really probably weren't, I won't say the consumer wasn't necessarily even asking for it. Like the amount of the amount of courage that took to kind of create a brand that was selling beer, really educating the market on it. But I feel like, to a big degree, Paul took that torch and ran with it. But he also, I think, was conscious of making beer that was approachable for the consumer. So how do you take, he takes the legacy that Ed and those guys had, and kind of, I guess it's that challenge of, how do you honor what was before you, yet also putting your own stamp on it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, you describe it perfectly. So we like to do that, and I think that's been part of the success of Big Rock. Is like they started with beers that were not gonna shock the consumer. Yeah, they were different, but they were close enough that any consumer that was drinking Molson would not be displeased by trying it, and then finding out that it's maybe more flavor or is something more to it than just a regular light lager or just a traditional lager beer, and that was kind of part of what Paul did by developing some recipes that were innovative in some way. It's a different beer, but there's no aggressively different. And it's been our approach. Like every time we approach innovation, we look at, we understand our consumer, and yes, we want to be, progressive and make cutting edge or, new products that are, trending. But at the same time, we understand our following, and they might not be necessarily interested in the super, lambic, even though we've made it in the past. It's like, you have some consumers. So our idea is to make liquids that are, high quality, consistent, like that you can, taste batch over batch and always kind of get the same flavor profiles, characteristics, but at the same time have that wiggle room to add, new hop varieties and things like that. And that's part of what we've been doing is, we carry on with our tradition. That's why we have our core brands that are, long-standing brands in the country. And now we're just slowly also introducing some new styles, which we carefully, throughout our innovation process, we discuss and say, okay, do we want to get into this space? And we might not be, the leaders now in terms of putting that style on trend, as maybe we were a few years ago. But it's also a reality that, because of the size of our operation, we need to be a little bit more mindful when we innovate, because the batch size is, it's easier when you're in a small scale, because if you make, 10 hectoliters of a beer that you're just trying something or a new ingredient or a new method, and it doesn't work out, the impact is not as high as when you're making, 200 hectoliters of it, and then you're stuck not only with the liquid, but this financial cost and all that. So we normally tend to carry our innovation process a little bit slower than I would do, for example, when I was working at other smaller craft breweries. But we try to do, as we always describe, is we're not just about making a beer that just for the first batch, is making a brand that we know will withstand for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And then obviously you make it, and then you can make variations, and you can always, at least that's my motto, there's always room for improvement, and you look and you make a batch. And that's why sometimes when in a smaller craft breweries, when you're constantly just rotating your beers, I always say, the first time you brew a beer, and that's since I've been even from a homebrewing standpoint, you can see it is the first time you brew it is not the best batch.
Right.
It could be good, and you can make wicked and amazing beers, but there's always something as a brewer that you say, well, if I change, maybe I just change a little bit the hopping addition on this point, or the fermentation temperature here and there, or whatever, then you get the opportunity of making those tweaks. And that's something I like about Big Rock, because since we're not in the game of just making a new beer and changing it every month or every week, I do get the opportunity to have a second and a third go at it, and say, okay, last time, or sometimes the beer turns amazing, but operationally gives you a lot of complexity. You have an extra long ladder, because then you say, okay, well, let's play a little bit with the mash profile and make some changes and adapt it in a way that give you efficiency, but without impacting the end result as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the philosophy we take.
So I like that, and I want to. I'm really curious about what that philosophy is, and how you've kind of been able to incorporate your own philosophies. But I want to start kind of like, let's start like way back from where you came from, because I feel like there's a lot of perspective that you kind of bring to the company and to the industry. So you're born and raised in Venezuela, is
Correct.
that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so describe like just what that is, like Venezuela versus Canada. I'm always fascinated when people come to Canada, because I'm thinking, A, how do people find Canada? B, if they Google how cold it gets here in the wintertime, why the heck do they come? So maybe just describe like what that was like, growing up in Venezuela. What was that experience like?
So Venezuela, obviously, it's in South America, so we're just in the north of South America, just between Colombia and Brazil. So beautiful country. You have all this, the Caribbean Sea of the north, and then we have very beautiful mountains towards the south, kind of close to Brazil. So it's a very diverse country, and not only like from a geography standpoint, but also culturally, and like it's in some ways very close to Canada in terms that Venezuela is a country that kind of got made of immigrants. Okay. So there's massive communities from people from Spain, because obviously we were a Spain colony at some point, and then we liberated, but then across the early 1900s, sorry, we got immigration from Europe, like Spain, Portugal, massive people from Spain, from Italy, from Portugal, to some extent people from Germany. So people from the Middle East, like a lot of like people from Syria and things like so there's this kind of melting pot of different cultures and people, and so people there, if you go there, people are very friendly, very open to like foreign people, and like they like to have people even, and it's funny because it's like I always joke with my friends, like, and I don't want this to sound in a bad way, but it's like when you have any Latin people coming to North America, they think you're Mexican. Right. Well, when you have any guy going to like Venezuela, they think you're a gringo, you're like American. You could be from Europe, but like, hey, gringo, come, and like so it's very funny, but like people are really helpful, and it's a very like Latin people is a lot of happy people that like to have fun, joke. In general, like people are very happy and like joke, and obviously politically I'm not gonna get there because there's different views, and Venezuela suffer for a lot of different reasons through politics, but in general my upbringing was very happy. Like I grew up in a kind of like medium class community and have made friends from all kinds of lives and cultures. So I have lots of friends that are from European kind of background, and have people very good friends for Arabic. So like food is amazing. There's you can find all these different kinds of foods and adaptations of those foods made by people in Venezuela. Weather is a hot weather. It's a tropical country, so we're most of the year I don't know, like at least where I grew up, it'd be anywhere between 25 to 35 Celsius every time, like during the year. A bit of rain, but no snow. Yeah. We only get a little bit snow towards the mountains in the south, and then people, kind of like people that live near the coast, they have that kind of like island lifestyle. It's just everything is kind of slow, and then so it was really fun. It was really nice, and I grew up in a small town, and one of the things that brought me, I guess, in some way into the beverage industry is I grew up in a state farm, where Santa Teresa is the main rum company in Venezuela. So my dad used to be plant manager there for a few years. So till I was like 8 years old or 9 years old, I grew up in that state. I would go with him to the distillery, see all those distillation units and the vats and where all the rum was being stored, the barrels and all this. So that kind of got ingrained of me, and then I graduated from high school, went to university, did my chemical engineering, and I wanted to work but I don't know, I could have it easy and get into and work in a rum company, and I was like, no, I want to work in beer. I couldn't get it. Didn't get the opportunity at the time, and that's how I ended up going into the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
So oil and gas was great to me. It was a great experience. And now when I think of it, like I used to work cementing oil wells.
Yeah.
So I used to design cementing operations for oil wells. And it's kind of like being a brewer in some ways. Like, you know, you'll have a project, and then you have to get some additives and mix them and get the right conditions to pump it through the well and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was good, and it gave me the opportunity also to, you know, travel a lot. Like I had, you know, I spent time in Brazil, spent time in Colombia, spent time in Russia, spent time in Saudi Arabia. I went to Abu Dhabi, Middle East.
Wow.
So it was kind of like a fun experience, especially because, you know, you're young, you didn't have a lot of attachments or anything. So I was just kind of moving around until eventually, you know, the political situation in Venezuela kind of got too unstable, and I was kind of tired of all the situation, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna make life anywhere. Like I was at a point that I was, you know, considering getting married and all that, and I was like, I don't see my life like the problem with and it's not only Venezuela, but South America has been always very politically unstable, and like, you know, you can have a stints of very good years, 5-10 years, and then there's a government change and everything kind of goes south.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know if I want to be this way. So I was kind of looking for something more stable, and I had family living in Canada. So I came in 2006, I think, to visit, and I came to Calgary. I took the time also to study some English at the University of Calgary then, and that's how I, you know, knew about Calgary. So I spent the time here. It was during the summer, just a couple months, and I really liked it. I liked that I kind of clicked with the people here. I saw the country. You know, this is a country also made of immigrants, so there's a lot of similarities, and the people was really open and welcoming and, you know, very polite. And so I say, you know, it seems to me like a country I will move into if I were in that situation at some point. And well, sure enough, you know, I don't know, it was probably 10 years, almost 10 years after, I was like, I'm in that situation. And well, luckily, you know, kind of had the immigration programs, and I could apply because I was an engineer working in oil and gas, and got my PR and moved here, and well, been here kind of ever since.
So you're an engineer by trade, and oil and gas. So yeah, Calgary suits you. You get it. It's actually interesting that your dad worked as a distiller. Was he a distiller at the?
He was an industrial engineer, okay. So he used to be like run the operations in the plant, but he was not the master distiller.
So I remember years ago I met one of the head master distillers at Jack Daniel's.
Oh, wow.
He was a really, really smart guy. But what struck me, or what I find fascinating when you think about, you know, a big distillery, and it's very similar to a big brewery where consistency is key.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so from an engineering perspective, how do you, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I had a few other things that I know I want to lean into, but from an engineering perspective, like, because I guess that's where I'm curious, is how do you approach making beer? Like, you know, we were talking about that a little bit earlier before we hit record, but you know, do you see it as a science? Do you see it as an art? Because I feel like, especially with the core beers, you know, there's such a demand for it to be so consistent that maybe that's where your engineering background comes in.
Yeah.
Super helpful.
Yeah, it's I think it's hard to separate them, like, and say, you know, I'm just being an engineer here, and I'm just being a brewer artist on this side. They kind of mingled at some point, but the approach, like as I was just mentioning, right? Like my engineering background kind of allows me to understand the equipment and the process fairly well, like, and then, you know, understanding the advantages and limitations of the equipment you're working with, because, you know, it's different if you have a 2-vessel brew house and then you go into a 4-vessel brew house, or if you're, you know, we have our Casper Schultz, which is our 20 hectoliter brew house, is a decoction mash, while our main brew house is not. And so those things, so having the engineering background, I think it helps me a little bit to make that transition and that translation of, like, when you're scaling batches or doing certain things, to understand a little bit how that will, you know, turn into into the same product to look for that consistency when you're doing it in a brew house or the other. And then also like from a scientist's standpoint, it's like, okay, you know, it always starts with my basic calculation, right? Like I make my recipe, I make my calculations, I say, okay, this is what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
But then you factor in a little bit the understanding of your equipment, right? Like, you know, this be, you know, I don't know. I know, for example, sometimes when we make batches on our nano brew house, our color is always higher. It's just because the steaming in the kettle, like it just kind of caramelizes more or concentrates more of the sugar, so you always get a little bit more color. So when we make a nano batch and I see the color is slightly higher, I know that in the main brew house that color is going to drop probably 1 SRM or 1.5 SRM, because it's that by, you know, gathering some data and understanding the equipment. So that's a little bit on the science part. And then is the artist part is, okay, it's just more like the creativity part is like, okay, well, you know, I have all these numbers, but now this is, you know, we discuss in our innovation committee that we want a beer that is, you know, have, you know, these characteristics. I don't know, let's say pineapple or a peach this, and how can we make this? And then I start looking, you know, at my world of ingredients and say, okay, well, you know, we can use this hop, and then, well, when do we use it? If I add it in this, you know, early in the fermentation, maybe I get this biotransformation because it has this compound that might turn into this, and then you play around it and kind of, you know, go from there. And also like always kind of I guess that is part of my engineering a little bit, but it's always thinking forward on like, it's just not making the beer, like, because there's a lot of other things that happen just post fermentation once that beer is ready. Is it going to be filtered? Is it going to be, you know, just an unfiltered product? Do you need to dry hop it? How is that dry hops going to be? Like understanding like the tank geometry. Do you want to, you know, ferment it in a small tank or a horizontal tank or things like that? That's where we play around. But the creativity part is more like, to me, is more kind of like on flavor concoction side. Like and I guess sometimes I've been asked very odd things, like, you know, finding the way to use some equipment that is not meant for doing that. But like, you know, I don't know, it's tea in a, I don't know, we used a hop bag recently, like a while ago, to do a product that needed to have a tea steeping, and like we normally, you know, we normally wouldn't do that, but like we put it and then re-steep it and run it back to the kettle and things like that. So it's just that part, but it's a combination of it. And obviously, you know, the team as well is even though I'm the face of the beer, there's also a team, right, that works with me and alongside me, that, you know, it's all my operations team, but like we also have people in sales and marketing that are great, always, you know, coming with feedback and say, hey, you know what, like, what, I've tried this product, you should try it, like I got this. And I think, you know, that's where we have all these big brainstorming sessions in terms of how do we want to approach our next innovation round, what we want to get there. And sometimes we joke because it can take a bit of a, you know, a lengthy process of going there, but I do find a lot of value on it.
Well, that's actually one thing that I'm always curious about, is how collaborative is the overall team, you know, because I've seen situations where it's almost like there's back of house, front of house, and, you know, the two groups don't talk to each other. The brewers are saying, you know what, this is great, this can sell itself, we don't need a marketing team. And the marketing team is like, we're so brilliant, you could put, you know, garbage in there and we'd still be able to sell it. I think more and more companies are realizing that you have to be working as a team. So how important is that, you know, from like you were saying, your innovation perspective of getting that input from the sales and marketing? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to go out and they have to sell the product. So how have you guys managed to kind of create that fit where, you know, you guys that are producing the beers have that healthy relationship with sales and marketing?
I think it's to me, it's very important. Like, honestly, I find a lot of value because, yeah, like, you know, and you described it quite well, but there's, you know, there's breweries or brewing philosophies in which, you know, the brewer says, I'm gonna make this beer, this is the beer, you know, I'm just gonna tell you, and you gotta sell it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm just one person, right? Like I can have in my mind that, I don't know, I want to make this peppermint beer. In my mind is, yeah, this is gonna be great. But I seldom go out and go and talk to consumers, and I do go to liquor stores, but I don't spend, you know, hours of my day going over and checking what's in every aisle. And so you can get, you know, a little bit blindsided there if you just want to impose your, this is what we're gonna do, and then at the end, as you say, right, at the end of the day, they're gonna be dealing with a heavy bag to try and sell that product. So I find much more value when you involve both parties, because first is like, you know, it's collaboration. I always find, you know, brainstorming, you get some ideas, you always learn something, and then because your sales team and marketing team are always, that's their work, right? They're looking what's out there in the market, what's moving, what products hot, what's not, and what styles are going up, what styles are going down, and then marketing is like, hey, looking at branding, looking at how to position the market, look at, you know, what segments of the industry are growing and what are not. And of course, you know, I always get the opportunity or the free realm to, okay, we discuss and we try to line up in terms of our interest for the product that's going to go there.
Yeah.
And then I get to put my touch into it, with the opportunity to give them feedback, the opportunity to give them the chance to give me feedback once I made it. I say, okay, you know, we discussed, I gather all that intel from them, that this is what's moving in the market, this is where we want to be. And they're, you know, we've moved since I've been here over the last couple of years, we've moved a lot the needle in terms of making data-driven decisions rather than just going on a hunch and say, like, you know, these are the segments where we want to be, because, you know, this is where we see growth in the industry. This is what our consumer seems to be drinking and looking for. So I value that. And then we look and say, okay, let's say stouts are growing crazy. Then, okay, what kind of, do we want to make a stout? Sure, yes. Then I go, they don't come and tell me, hey, you got to use this malt and this hop. And that's my part of the operation. So I come up with a recipe, go there, put it in front of the team and say, okay, this is what I think, like, you know, this is a round one. Yeah. And, you know, this is the profile, this is the idea, the intention behind this beer. Do you guys agree with it? And then, you know, there's always feedback and say, okay, sometimes it's, you know, it's a great beer, but might not be the right beer for this variety pack or for this season. So what if we just change this and this, and then we iterate again and over until we get to the right product, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value, because then that buys in also the other side of the street, right? Like sales and marketing, once they know this is a good product that they're aligned to, then they're more encouraged to sell it, right? It's hard when you gotta sell. It's like, guy, you know, it's not a good product, and it's like, well, yeah, you still gotta push it.
Yeah.
But when you have a winner, when you have a product that you're proud of, then, you know, you go there and work hard to put it in the shelf, to put it in front of consumers and defend it as well. When someone say, it's not a good product or whatever, you get that. So I feel it's paramount, and the industry should, you know, especially like maybe in bigger organizations, because obviously in smaller breweries where, you know, the teams are so close knit, the guy that's making the beer might be the guy that's selling it. Yeah. So, but in a company like Big Rock, I think that adds a lot of value.
Yeah. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, no matter what company you're working for or with, you know, people want to be heard. And if people feel like they were part of that collaborative process, they're way more eager to get out there and sell it. So I think that's important. I want to kind of back up again, because you've done a lot of bold things in your life, which is, you know, one, deciding to move to Canada, but that transition from, you know, becoming an engineer to becoming a brewer, I'm really curious about, because obviously I think having that engineering background, you know, lends itself well to being a brewer, but it's pretty ballsy to decide, like, yeah, I'm gonna kind of change courses. So how did you come up with that? Like, where did that come from? And why brewing of all things to move into?
I think because, well, it kind of came up, as I say, when I was in university. Like in Venezuela, as I was just telling you, like, there's not a lot of craft brewing. Like, the industry is very in early stages. Nowadays, I've heard, I haven't been there for a few years, but but it's developing, but it's nowhere near North America and even other countries in South America like Chile or Argentina, where their industry is a little bit more developed. Uh, but so when I was studying chemical engineering, like I was like, well, I want to work in Polar, which is is the main brewing company in the country, and it's kind of like the equivalent to Molson or Labatt in here.
Okay.
Like they produce a big amount of beer, but it's mostly light lagers or just lager, like what we describe as yellow beer.
Yeah.
Nothing really exciting or new, but it's a good beer, especially for hot weather. Like when you're at 35 degrees every day, you don't want to be having a 7% beer.
Yeah.
So there you get, most beers are between 3.5% and 4, maybe 5%, and then you can drink 20 of them and feel like you're just drinking water, and it's all good. Rather than if you have 7 IPAs, then you might be a little bit hungover next day, but anyway, so that's where I got, but I never got the opportunity to work for them because I graduated from university and kind of right away got a really good offer to join Schlumberger in oil and gas, and that's where my career kind of diverted. And the interest came by because I used to see my dad in the distillery and the plant, and that was always exciting to me. Even when I was in high school, I had to do like a capstone project in my last year of high school. And I did like a wine wine with strawberry and honey in the labs of Santa Teresa Rum, like I was working. So it always I always had that bug in my ear, and I got into oil and gas, and it was a good career. Like I was enjoying it, but like the uncertainty of the oil and gas, in which you have all these downturns, and then I was working in Saudi Arabia for a couple of years. I was living there with my wife. And I don't know, I was just kind of like getting a little bit burnt out, and I told my wife, like, you know what, I'm just kind of not enjoying this anymore as much as I used to do in the past. So I want to change, and because we were living there, we were only permanent residents in Canada by then, so we had to come back to Canada regardless. So we were going to lose our PR status in here. So I started looking, and I told my wife, you know what, I'm just going to give it a try. I always wanted to work in the brewing industry, and I knew that the brewing industry in Canada was, growing and kind of developing at a high pace. So I was like, okay, there might be an opportunity there. And so I started studying brewing through the Siebel Institute just to test the water, kind of like I did, I think it's called Concise Course in Brewing Technology for a few months. And I really liked it. There's a lot of science in brewing, so there's all this chemistry, which I loved, and the microbiology and all the processes of fermentation. So it kind of clicked on me with my chemical engineering background. And I was like, well, this is something I can do. So I kind of started looking, okay, where can I get more, a more professional study in it, or deeper studies in it. And I found out, like, obviously I had to come back to Canada. So I was like, I found like, well, I could have done the IBD or just online, or apply to one of the programs here in Canada. So we had the Niagara College, the Old College, and the Kwantlen one. And I applied to actually end up applying to the 3 of them and being accepted in the 3 of them. And then I was like, well, where do we want to live? So we decided going to BC just because of weather and I don't know. Like I was like, well, we're gonna be. It's in Langley, but it's close to Vancouver. But Niagara, I don't know. Like And then also my wife was like, oh man, it might be just too small of a city to live. So we end up going there. I got into the program, and the main reason also was because I had no hands-on experience there. So I could have done IBD online, but I've never had the opportunity to be hands-on on it, and I'd never worked at a brewery or even seen a brewery from the inside before that. So I went to the college, and we had the brewery there, so I was able to get some understanding and hands-on skills, and I did my first semester. And then second semester, I started working at a craft brewery. So and the way I approached it is I wanted to learn everything from the ground, because I could, try to leverage on my engineering background to try to get a higher position. But I actually started working first serving beer in a brewery called Andina Brewing in Vancouver. So I was working just a tap room.
Yeah.
And seeing the brewer making the beer there, and just asking questions and things, and home brewing obviously, but then I got an opportunity to work as a cellar hand at what was by that time was factory brewing, and then it changed to craft collective. It was mainly a contract manufacturing brewery, and I started working my way just from the cellar, then became a brewer, then I was just kind of doing a little bit of everything. And then I got an opportunity to I kept working kind of full time while I was in school. Then I was finishing my program, and then I got the opportunity to join Bridge as their production manager and head brewer.
awesome.
And that's when I kind of took off, and I had a very small team. I think I had four or five guys working with me. So, but I was managing production, brewing sometimes, not developing all the recipes, making some beers, and then it was I was loving it, honestly, and it was really good. But I always, and maybe it was my engineering background, I was kind of always seeking for a slightly bigger operation. And then I got the opportunity to join Molson at the Fraser Valley. So it was, a brand new brewery, super high tech equipment, all the equipment that I was, we had a classical equipment and technology in the brewery that when I was taking that class, I was like, I'll never see this equipment in my life. Then all this equipment was in this brewery. So it was a great opportunity to use that knowledge and kind of put it into use with that. And I had a lot of learnings in terms of, working on a fully automated brewery rather than on a manual craft brewery where you barely see the product.
Right.
It's everything is hard pipe. So sometimes I was like joking, like, where's the beer in here? It's like, you're just kidding, like, but it gave me a different perspective also of what you can achieve if you have some automation in some things. And in terms of it's funny because there's always this controversy in the craft brewing world that people kind of try to shame a little bit the macro breweries, the quality of the product. But to me, it's like when you define quality, then there's ways how you define it. To me, quality is being able to hit the same product and taste profile, the same specs every time. Well, and then if you use that as a concept when you're in a craft brewery, you might not be your quality. Then if that's your concept, then it might not be so high then, because you see so much variation because the process is a little bit standalone. So that's why you see obviously having the tools helps to make more consistent product, and having the equipment to be able to tell what's your color, what's your views, all those things. So that was something that as an engineer I was like, I need to when I'm making it, I want to know the guts of the product, and while working at Molson, I got a lot of learnings.
Absolutely.
But then I got the opportunity
I like that you
kind of come to
mentioned
Big Rock, and I think to me was the perfect fit at the time from a family standpoint,
where I see
and then
a big,
also from a career standpoint.
and you mentioned
I was
some of the schools
working at
that people
Molson, I was
go to
missing a
become
little bit the
brewers,
opportunity of
brewmasters.
being in a craft brewery,
When I look
developing
at
new products,
Alberta
playing with
as,
these new
as a
ingredients
beer
and all these
community,
things
beer industry,
that
and you look at
when I was in the smaller craft breweries, I was like, well, yeah, I love playing
all
with
of
all
the
these
breweries kind
new
of
ingredients
almost
and making a new beer every week and all this.
The
But I was
quality of
missing
beer
a little bit
over the
that
last
bigger
10 years,
scale
in my mind,
operations.
overall, has
So
just
kind of Big Rock
improved so
is
much.
just the perfect
And I do believe
match in there. So I have
a
the very
huge
big
part of
craft
that is
component with a very
getting that
high volume operation.
scientific
So it makes me happy
perspective on
in
how
both
to
sides
make
of
beer,
my
because
career.
Absolutely.
it used to be that someone enjoyed making beer in their garage and they went from there to producing commercially, and there's a big gap there, and so these schools have kind of filled that gap where now they're getting that science background, and then you can take that science that's going to help you with the consistency, and now you can match it with the art of it, right?
When Olds College started, and all of the breweries kind of almost followed suit, and the quality of beer over the last 10 years, in my mind overall, has just improved so much. And I do believe that it's a huge part of that is getting that scientific perspective on how to make beer, because it used to be that someone enjoyed making beer in their garage and they went from there to producing commercially, and there's a big gap there, and so these schools have kind of filled that gap where now they're getting that science background, and then you can take that science that's going to help you with the consistency, and now you can match it with the art of it, right?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like obviously I haven't been long enough in Canada to say I can't say like beer 10, 15 years ago was way worse than it is, but I do see the improvement year over year, and the fact that when you go to the awards ceremonies, and it could be either Alberta Beer Awards, Canada Beer Awards, Canada Beer Cup, even World Beer Cup, and you see the amount of breweries that are winning awards, and the breweries that are actually winning and killing it, and then you can make really quick the connection with who's the brewer of that brewery and which program that brewer attended, and it's been cases like I think it was a couple of years ago that at the Kwantlen University, so we had the KPU lab or nano brewery, because it's kind of more like a nano brewery. The main brew house was kind of like a 2 hectoliter brew house, really nice NSI system, automated and everything, but the scale was very small. But we used to make, every year, like the students of the last year of the program make their kind of capstone project, which is a beer, and some of these beers we submit to competitions. The year I was in school, we won in there is a competition, I forgot the name, in the US that is kind of like the US beer.
Yeah.
But it's between brewing schools, so we won that. I can't, and with beers from our schools, and then that same year, the brewery, I think it was that same year, the year after, the Kwantlen Polytechnic won Brewery of the Year in the BC Beer Awards with the beers. So it tells you a lot about the quality of the beer that is being made by the students, and a lot of that is because, I mean, and no disrespect to people that has started, with no knowledge, because a lot of that is value, and a lot of those guys develop themselves to be super high quality and high level brewers. But when you start, understanding the process and understanding the consequences of your actions, because in brewing, it's always you do this is going to happen. So you boil longer, then whatever, you pitch more yeast, then there's an impact. For any action, there's a reaction kind of thing, or a consequence. So when you understand that, then you can make more educated decisions in terms of the brewing process, or when the way you want to make your beer. So that obviously leads to having a better product at the end of the day. And I think these 3 programs in the country are bridging that gap. So now you're having, people that come to work at a brewery and understand, why the brewer or me, I'm chasing the guys and making sure they're not picking any
recently, I don't want to
oxygen
put you on the spot here, but
transfer
one of the things actually I ran into Brad as I was coming in here.
Sometimes, you hire a person that
I feel like
doesn't have
there's
the
always
knowledge and background,
challenges that
he
you're
might not
overcoming,
understand why
as any company, but specifically as
more
brewers
coaching
and
a
as
little bit more
breweries, because you're trying to forecast
on those
volumes,
people
you're trying to predict
the guys
trends,
that are coming from the program,
you're needing to deal with the inputs of
they might have
aluminum cans and all of the variabilities of prices and
years of
quality of bars. So every day there's a lot.
They come out and they understand, and when you tell them, hey,
in Calgary,
you don't have to be worried. Tell them,
with
make sure you're purging the tank, because they
state of emergency with the water.
Their learning.
How does something like that, that's a hell of a wrench to throw into your day to day. So how did you end up dealing with that?
One of the things actually I ran into Brad as I was coming in. Took a few meetings. I feel like there's always challenges that you're overcoming. As any company, but specifically as brewers and as breweries, because you're trying to forecast volumes, you're trying to predict trends, you're needing to deal with the inputs of the aluminum cans and all of the variabilities of prices and quality of bars. So every day there's a lot. Recently, in Calgary, with the state of emergency with the water, how does something like that, that's a hell of a wrench to throw into your day to day. So how did you end up dealing with that?
Oh, I mean, it took a lot of a few meetings and planning. Obviously, brewing is a very water intensive process, because 96% or 95% of a beer is water. So when we heard that, obviously, I came to the brewery. I remember getting here around early in the morning. I normally here around 6:45 in the morning. I'm coming out of the car and see my phone and have the alarm and the message, and then immediately it's like, oh well, I go and take a look at the brewing schedule. Where are we? And then I go talk to the brewer, say, okay, there were some brews already in process. I say, okay, you know what? Do not match in the next brews. Let me reconvene with my my boss, which is the director of brewery operations. and talk to senior leadership in terms of what's going to be our approach to water usage. So we reconvened. We kind of like said, okay, well, this is where we are. How many brews have? How much liquor are we going to have? You know, because the problem is, you stop all brewing activity right now, then it means you have no beer 3-4 weeks from now. Your packaging line has nothing to run because, well, you know. So we were in this kind of like selfish choice of trying to be a good neighbor and try to support the community, but also being smart because we, at the end of the day, we also have a business to run. So requirement from the city at the time was to reduce usage to like the information was, I think, to reduce by around 20%. So that first week, I remember we decided to stop brewing right there because when the announcement came in, it was kind of like on a Thursday or late Wednesday or Wednesday, I can't remember, but we were kind of through most of our brewing schedule by then. So we said, okay, you know, I had like probably like 4 brews to finish, and I said, okay, you know what, we're not gonna do the next 4 brews. I obviously talked to the demand planning team and say, okay, what's the impact if this liquid is not there? So you know, we checked our inventory levels. It's okay, we might be a really bit lean, but if we can get them, you know, the following week, then we should we'll package and we'll be fine. So we kind of took a kind of like a smart decision and say, okay, well, I can get rid of these 4 brews, which, you know, the usage of water for brews is probably over 1,000 hectoliters, and then we just, you know, cut down on like, I normally we produce some RTDs, and a lot of that RTD blending production happens over the weekend. And so I decided, you know, again, let's talk with production. Can we just postpone this production run that was planned for next Wednesday? Can we just push it a week? And then, yeah, fine. So we cut down. So that first week, we saved a lot of water. We talked across the whole brewery to reduce any, you know, unnecessary water usage, like, you know, like you're just cleaning like we foam the floors, and at the end of the week, every week, just, you know, and then, okay, well, if there are areas that are looking okay, just don't do it this week. We'll get to it. At that time, we were thinking it was going to be resolved in, you know, 4 or 5 days. Then the following week, we came back and figured out, okay, this might be longer than we expect. So what we did is, okay, we'll reduce. So I normally mash in a brew every 5 hours, and we run the brewery 24/5. So on a given week, I do about 20 brews, 21 if we push it a little bit. So we reduced to brew 4 brews a day and not brew on Fridays. So we kind of cut down, you know, 5 brews of our schedule plus usage during the Fridays. So that was our contribution. And I think, you know, we were in continuous communication, our CEO and with the city, and they were very pleased about, like, you know, all the cut-ins and the restrictions that they were doing in terms of usage. But at the end of the day, it's like, we couldn't just, we wanted to say, okay, we want to shut down fully, but I think we did our fair share, like, in terms of when we calculate how much water we were not using, as well as, like, there was also, so we have our water tanks, and we produce deaerated water, for example, for some processes. So we were not like, we like depleted all of our stored water first before we made more water, and then every time we were refilling our water tanks, we were doing it just restricting the flow, just to be, you know, to have the less draw out of the system as possible. So and I think it got us by. Obviously, you know, I don't think we're going to be in a tight spot like we were. I think because we were able to plan, and because we maybe were a little bit lucky that we had some inventory stock on hand that allow us to push some of these brews forward that we now going to get, not, you know, not mid-July or late July. We're going to have them maybe mid-August. It's still okay. We'll have to do a little bit of work, and some of that is also an impact to the businesses. Once you lose that volume,
living in Canada, you've lived.
It's really hard to get it back into just a regular work week schedule.
I'm
to
curious
put it in.
Outside of work.
So we're
because
like we're doing overtime shifts to catch up. We did it in packaging.
What do you do
just to
outside
stop
of
the
work?
use of a pasteurizer? We do
because
and run some overtime on a Saturday to catch up
quality
some
of
of the
life, and
then
what do they say, happy wife, happy life? Like this, you know, as a family, do you guys enjoy Calgary, and what do you kind of do outside?
So that, but I think it's the right decision, right? Like at the end of the day, if we run out of water, then there's no water for us to make beer, and then our people in the city is just suffering, right? Like no one wants to live without water, so I think it was the right call, and I will do it any time.
Nice.
So you guys, living in Canada, you've lived in BC. What I'm curious outside of work,
Yeah.
because Calgary has a lot of, obviously we're close to the mountains,
Yeah.
stuff like that. What do you do outside of work? And because quality of life, and what do they say, happy wife, happy life. Like
Yeah.
this as a family, do you guys enjoy Calgary, and what do you kind of do outside?
Oh yeah, we love it. It's I mean, no disrespect to BC. Like BC is a beautiful province, and
Yeah,
Vancouver
nice.
is a great city.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I find Calgary to be. I have a 3-year-old, just turned 3 on July 2nd. So I'm just kind of like a recent daddy, I would say. So we're still figuring out things, and I find Calgary to be a city that is a little bit more suited to grow a family, like especially like young family. But my wife and I are young, even though I'm 38, but and I so we spend a lot of my weekends are revolved nowadays a lot around doing things with my kid, and like take him to the zoo, go to the park, and we do enjoy camping a lot. So I'm very camping enthusiast. So we like to go to the mountains. We go quite often to Lake Koocanusa in BC, so just passing Fernie, and camp there to spend the weekend. So that's a lot what we do. Sometimes I enjoy not having to do nothing, but yeah, my day to day, like the city, we go around. We love going to Princess Island. We go like this time of the year. Calgary Folk Fest is kind of like a thing that we go. We went last year. We'll go again this year. It's just like it's a fun city. I find it's a good combination of of a city that has enough good things. Like you can find really good restaurants or bars if you want to go. Like I'm not a very party person. Like I don't go to clubs or anything like that. So I can take, but like restaurant, my wife, she's a foodie. She loves trying to do restaurants and things, and the food level here is quite good. So we're pretty happy, and the fact that we have there's a big Latin community here, and we have a lot of friends here in Calgary. So it's made us feel more supported because we don't have our family here. So whenever my wife needs to go to the dentist and I'm working, it's like, how do we do with kids? It's like, so we always having friends here that can, hey, can I just leave Lorenzo with you for 3 minutes while I go to the dentist and come back? So that's a big help, and something that we didn't have over in BC because we're living in Chilliwack.
Okay, so I'm going to end with a really random question, but you're an engineer.
City, but it had all the lakes around, so it was nice.
Engineers are,
but we were very lonely there.
By
like
nature,
no support
curious.
system.
So it doesn't have to be a work-related topic, but is there something that
a little bit
that
could
you're
be a little bit
curious
overwhelming
about these days that you're kind of leaning
Calgary
into?
is,
I mean, it could be
us,
UFOs.
like,
I just had a UFO.
It's funny because when we
conversation with
first
a guy
moved
the
to
other day,
Canada,
but yeah, like, is there?
came to
Like,
Calgary,
what are you?
My wife, she seemed a little bit on the side about the city, but now she loves it. Like I jokingly come and say, hey, you know what? Found a job in Nova Scotia now. And she was like, "What? No, we're not moving." Like so it's funny because I see her her reaction, and it's like it's good. Like she's a Calgarian now. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to end with a really random question. But you're an engineer, and stereotypically engineers are, I would say, by nature curious. So it doesn't have to be a work-related topic, but is there something that you're curious about these days that you're kind of leaning into? I mean, it could be UFOs. I just had a UFO conversation with a guy the other day. But yeah, like, is there? What are you?
Well, it's gonna sound pretty basic, but like, I'm an engineer, but I'm not a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
So I dealing with cars, like working on cars, doing mechanics on cars. Like I mean, they do have a general understanding of a motor and things, but like I never like myself gotten into it. So when I moved to Calgary, I have a really good friend that is. He used to work in body shops and so he's very well versed with cars. So he made me buy a car to go overlanding, and so I've been like really learning more and more and all this stuff, and like now I spend a lot of my time also on weekends like working on my car, installing things and doing these new things. So that's something I often do, and obviously as a beer geek, I'm always curious about beer.
Awesome,
So
man. Well,
literally I go
this
to
has
any
been
liquor
great.
store
I really appreciate
and
it.
I start looking at the shelves and like, you know,
like I said,
see what's,
for
there
me
and like, oh
personally,
man, this
Big
this
Rock's
sounds like a
always
bad idea,
been
but I'll
a
try
big
it.
supporter
You know, I'm
of-
always
of
and
what we do as a
and I
company,
love that
but
about the craft
even
brewing
just
industry, to be
you
honest.
know, when I
like,
think
you know,
about all the
sometimes
people that have
it's hard
worked
for me
here
to do
and
it
come
because
through
of the
the doors.
size of our operations, but sometimes you
just
know you
we
want,
wouldn't be
you have an idea that you might
where
think is
we're
like, this
at
might be
as a
idea,
beer
but sometimes
community if
it
it
works.
wasn't for everything
Right.
that you guys do.
Like
So
the fact
cool
that
to kind of
people,
learn about what
like,
you know how you're kind of
takes the
taking
risk
that
and put out there a
kind of
product
pushing
that
it
might
forward. So
sound,
thanks
you
for
know,
taking the time.
crazy when you hear it, and then you try it and say, "Fuck, this is unbelievable." You
Thanks,
know,
man.
so that's a lot of my interest as well. Like I read a lot of like reading beer blogs and
That was
things
good.
like that.
Thank you very
So
much.
That's where I am nowadays.
Awesome, man. Well,